Great. Well, I'm going to, we have a good amount of folks in the room, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If everyone has joined us before, my name is Natasha French, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm super excited to have three of my favorite folks joining us today to talk about top things brands miss when activating with teams. This conversation started at the National Sports Forum a few months ago when we were all in Los Angeles, and we really were kind of talking about, we spend a lot of time working with brands, working with teams, working with clients to make sure their fan experience, consumer experiences are the best that they can be from a partner vendor perspective. And we started talking about data, what things go wrong, what we're not including. And then I'm like, well, why don't we actually share all of this information with everyone else out there? So we are super excited to have all three of you join today. And I'm going to quickly just have them each tell a little bit about themselves. So we're going to start off with James Giglio, who's the CEO and founder of MVP Interactive.
Hey everyone, I appreciate you coming back to another monthly webinar. And as Natasha had mentioned, my colleagues here are what we call circuit colleagues, where we generally find each other on the same trade show floors and traveling the country together, looking to engage brands in our client base. And so, there's a level of commiseration when you're on the road. And, as we believe in our technologies and our platforms and everything that we can provide our clients value with, sometimes the struggle and the grind really allows for some new opportunities and strategies to sort of unfold with how we evangelize our technology. So to Natasha's point, this is a good sort of symposium for all of that. We hope to have a very candid, honest conversation, both from a vendor side, client side, brand side. So we hope that this is a free-flowing forum and, we can really let loose and be real honest and share some thoughts together.
Awesome. Thank you, James. I'm going to head up to Lenny. Lenny, who's the Vice President of Business Development at Tradable Bits, if you can make a brief intro.
Hey, thanks everyone for having me. Like James said, happy to hang out with some friends and chit chat here. Like Natasha said, I'm a Vice President of Business Development at Tradable Bits. We're a fan data company where we really empower a lot of sports, music, and entertainment companies to generate revenue using data.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lenny. And last but certainly not least, we have Amir Zonozi, who's the CEO and co-founder of Zoomph.
Yeah, excited to be here. Definitely see a lot of friendly faces and looking forward to venting on all the, we're going to have a fun time talking about these brands and all the amazing work that they do in the space, and see a lot of amazing right holders here that represent them. And Lenny, James, and Natasha are some of the best, people that I love cornering in a conference room with and just talking shop. And so excited to have a informal podcast-like conversation. I know it's being recorded, but looking forward to having fun. And on our side, we're the nerd referees. So we look at these amazing activations that everyone's doing, work with the teams, work with the brands, work with the agencies, and we put together the numbers behind evaluations, behind the audiences. And so just looking at the amazing work that these groups do, being able to put some numbers behind it. So really, really pumped to have this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
He's one half of the tag team wrestling crew you have on that banner there. So yeah.
Well, just so admin information, Lenny was surprised this was not a webinar, and we do that for a reason. We want you all to participate and interact as well. So please during the conversation, add any questions you want in the chat section. We'll open it more formally towards the end of the conversation to questions, but please make sure you put those in there in case they come to mind. I'll start off with a few, but again, this is a conversation. So kind of get started. James, what would you say are one of the greatest pain points when setting up activations for brands when they're working with teams?
Sure. One word: budget. No.
I want it yesterday.
Yeah. Stating the obvious there, but all kidding aside, especially when it comes to the level of bespoke and experiential technology that we are able to develop, it's really a fine balance of really satisfying what the brand and the team is looking for in a cohesive marketing standpoint, but also having enough resources to build the technology that isn't widely scalable or commercialized because they are so very customized, right? And so it's a fine balance. And I think a strategy that we try to provide value to our clients is give a good, better, best sort of options of, what the interactions could look like based on budget, maybe making some concessions. Everyone has a champagne taste and a beer budget on occasion. And so we really find the balance. And I think for us, we try not to get roadblocked by not seeing a vision through for a short-term budget constraint, knowing that whether we take on what we call a loss leader, where, we may sort of not hit a margin or a revenue target that we need to execute, but knowing that the future value of that set activation or the promotion behind it or the launch of the technology will really live on beyond, the one-day event or the particular season. So I think that is a big pain point initially, just because there isn't a general rate card that brands could really look to. And I think, we provide that value-based development, with a holistic approach of going long-term and sort of extending out these experiences. And then there's a host of other environmental issues that you need to take into consideration. I know we've talked about some of those issues in past webinars, especially on marketing tours or, working within the confines of a stadium or a particular, event, whether it's weather-related, Wi-Fi, power, et cetera, and making sure that you can kind of walk through and factor in all of those considerations as it relates to the live event technology. And so I think what's unique here with the partners with Tradable Bits and Zoomph is, the physical interaction that we are able to provide, but how we sort of tie in their platforms to, create even more value with the brands. And one of the considerations as a real life example of both having some environmental or constraints from the activation and then tying into data would be the experience we built for the Tennessee Titans, where during the COVID era, the team wanted a community outreach. They wanted to market the team in the upcoming season, but we weren't sure if there were going to be any fans in the seats. And so they commissioned a local artist, painted a 130-foot mural, and then we were able to make that come to life through augmented reality. So it was a touchless experience. It allowed us to build a new emerging technology with web-based AR. And then we partnered with Amir and his team to really show the social amplification of how an analog experience can then be turned digitally and then sort of tracked and traced in terms of an ROI. So I thought that was a perfect blend of being able to kind of work with these guys to really show, hey, there was an investment made into the mural itself, and it's a fairly analog experience, but whether it's a community outreach or ROI was not really of a concern for the brand, we felt it was important to kind of show that value. And so, Amir, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you recall that from, the 2020 season, 21 season, some of the data that you were able to help extrapolate for us.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, James, because these activations, they hit a number of different objectives these brands are trying to hit. And so, this is and working through the team. So before I answer that, I want to kind of frame this in a couple of ways. One is they're looking at their media. So is this going to hit TV, right? Are regional news stations going to come and cover this event or whatever it might be, like the mural did, which got a lot of attention, which was really cool. And it was the data that you get from that is local, and they're super fans, they're passionate, they're showing up for this event. It's Derrick Henry, everything that was around it. They're looking at social, right? And so the Instagram stories and the AR kind of capabilities that you guys provide, people able to record that, capture it, and share it. That's where we really factored in and captured the metrics around this. So that's one way of calculating the value, is looking at the exposure that was generated from this whether it's through the owned entities, so from the teams, or earned from people from the event, mentioning the hashtag, the activation, different ways. And so we opened up a full search capability. We weren't limited to just what the team was, just everyone sort of talking about it. Also in social, where we didn't really talk about this as much as, but the audiences that converted or engaged with it, you can segment that. And I know Lenny was waiting for it, and it's just get riches, right? So we look at every activation, we look at the niche audiences. Did this bring in family people? Did this bring in B2B brands, and their focus is like IT decision makers or whatever it might be? You're bringing in a certain demographic to these events. And so being able to capture who's talking about it, who cares about it, because you've got to line this back to what the brand wants. The other things that they're looking for is PR, right? So all the news that comes from the websites, contextual messaging creative that goes into this. All of these are little aspects that just all around, it's a flywheel around these events. So we are able to capture the audience and seeing that there's super fandom for, because at the end of the day, like, we deal with other businesses don't see this as much as sports does, but these are legitly fanatics, right? Like people that are borderline crazy, that are like going, waiting, doing these, crazy things to go be a part of these different experiences. And so we're able to measure that passion of fandom. And that's great. And you're hitting that. But how do you also look at the audiences that are not massive fans and they're not crazy Titans fans, that are passing by, that are looking at this, that are being exposed to it? We can measure that in the growth over time with the different activations that they do. So events like this, these tentpole events that they plan out season long, all these different ways to sort of activate upon, it's critical to understand not just performance and the value that's being generated, the people that are coming through, whether it's first party data that's submitting to like be a part of this activation, or separately just the people talking about it and the attention that it generates. So those are really full activations to sort of look at. And we want to look at multiple things. I know we've all worked with the Titans. I know Lenny and Tradable Bits have done things through Instagram stories. Another thing I'll add to this is brands sometimes, they don't realize that there's unknown entities. So we want to get Instagram stories of random people that are going through the event. That's just not available through Instagram. That's, if you do go get it, that's like illegal data people are scraping. But all these things, you want to check these boxes of knowing like, okay, whose accounts are these going through? Are there other activations that we can build across around this? Are we able to show that we got their key impact through the segments that they're trying to reach? And are we thinking ahead of time of the content that we're going to be collecting after this event to signify if it was a success or not? And so that's the way I'll frame it. But like in this one example that James brought up, MVP Interactive knocked it out of the park for the Titans. And it was great to see that amongst all their other activations that they were doing at the time, how this resonated with fans differently, specifically super fans in Nashville that were going to that event physically to go experience it.
And Amir, maybe you can just touch on that. Kind of, was there a pain point that you thought there was a miss with something that you could collect on the data piece, or your team could have added to make that even more successful?
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of the content that they were looking for the show is like Instagram stories of people experiencing it. But Instagram Meta doesn't give that data. Since Cambridge Analytica, I know like that name is a throwback for a lot of us. But in 2018, they made multiple changes to their APIs and the data that they provide. So you can't pull unowned accounts that are non-brand or creator accounts. So if it's a brand account or a creator account, yes, you can pull that data. They'll have something that's out there. You can project the data even if you don't have that authentic. But if it's, everyday person that's not a creator account or not a branded account, then we're not going to be able to get that information, at least legally. And so those are elements that sometimes the brands are not thinking about fully. But the way I kind of look at this is these teams are now deploying like agencies, digital campaigns that are specialized within the market that they're trying to reach. And so the teams need to also think about this and work with their vendors to make sure that these boxes are checked. We don't expect teams to know all this information. We're the nerds that are here to solve that challenge for them. But I think what Lenny and James were saying in the beginning is being forthright on, here's the budget, here's the things, like all that information that gives us context to what is a win for the brand customer, if it's through the team, is important for us to hear. And we can then eliminate these gaps after the fact. Usually it's afterwards where we're having like, well, if we knew before, we could have guided you to do this and that. And I think, I'll say this in a very light way. It's like brands need to trust teams more. and need to understand that teams know how to best put them out there. And the teams are trusting vendors like Tradable Bits, like MVP Interactive to make the most of those moments by understanding what's possible and what's not. And so it's a lot of trust that's going to be needed in order to accomplish this, and they need to be upright about what objectives they're trying to reach. And I don't think brands are, we know they're looking for cultural fan points that are passionate, like sustainability. I know we got 5TS team on the call here, and sustainability. Like, they want these emotional platforms, these things that care and matter. They want breakthrough, turn your neck sort of activations. This is what that Titans mural was, right? Like, it just caught everyone's attention. People were lining up and being part of it. They want these big brand moments that are PR. And so, like, as long as we can hit all those things that they're looking for, they just need to be a little bit more forthright. And sometimes they share that with some organizations. Some teams are a little bit better at saying, we will find the right way to tell your story, but it's got to be architected through us. And the team's got to trust, at the end of the day, the vendors. But, I've said it multiple times, and it's just that these teams are really these specialists now. They are the influencers and agencies kind of all as one. And it takes an ecosystem of technology and with the brands to like get this done in the right way.
Yeah, I think building off of that, really, it's having that alignment on the data strategy for the brand too, right? So what brand is it? What category is it? What's important to them? And making sure the team, a lot of the teams are working to be sophisticated as an agency in that way, but making sure there is proper alignment and understanding what that objective of metric of success is. And ultimately, you don't want a CSV of a bunch of junk emails. You want qualified leads. So what is that, and how do you do it in the right way to get proper data for the brand partner? And ultimately for teams, they're also getting value out of building a first party database around that, which then coincides in how they sell to a brand. I have, my fans who are interested in these, categories or these different things, and it just helps them align their fan base with a brand properly. So making sure there's good first party data collected around that ties together.
Yeah, no, Amir, it's a good point. And Lenny, you had referenced, using teams as an agency. And I think, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Chicago at the Sports Business Journal Brand Innovation Summit. And, that was really a topic point in terms of brands really leveraging the teams as that agency. I think more and more, despite maybe headcount, teams are trying to sort of creatively think and use their workforce to think and act like an agency, because who's going to know the community, the team, the brand, the sport, the fan better than the colleagues of the property, right? And so I'd have to, I recall back in 2015, even with Anheuser-Busch and the initiative that they made, where I thought it was a good, it was a positive sea change in the industry that, here you have one of the world's largest and best advertisers that essentially fell into a sort of automatic renewal of sponsorship with cross properties, because teams felt that was just a given, right? AB and Bud Light were going to just give X amount of millions of dollars, and we're going to put up signs, and you're going to get spots on the jumbotron. And there was a real strategic effort that put the pressure on teams to say, hey, if you want these sponsors or brand dollars that we're underwriting, you're going to need to come up with ideas. You're going to really need to innovate. We're going to lean on technology. And so it's been a nice sort of maturation in terms of brands, as talented as they are, as internally with their marketing teams, as well as even their third-party agencies. But yeah, really leaning on the teams to kind of bring this all together. And then conversely, I think based on that cultural shift, we've had experience or conversations where now brands are pressuring sponsors, or teams pressuring sponsors to be more innovative and, hey, look to spend your dollars elsewhere rather than maybe your conventional analog advertising methods during the game. And so I think it's a nice sort of movement that's happening, that collectively, we're all sort of trying to challenge each other to solve a problem and creatively think of new ways to activate.
And kind of going off this before we kind of jump into the accountability of brands and teams, is for each of you and what you bring, what do you think is the one thing brands are missing when they're activating with these teams? I mean, there might be a few, but maybe there's one you each can highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I think just similar to what I had mentioned, I think what we have seen is on the property side, you know, them really pressuring the brands to be more innovative. And I think that even locally, I'm in Philadelphia, you guys can use deduction to figure out which organization this was, but they had brought a sponsor to us and said, you know, we really want them to activate an immersive or technology. And, you know, they can't spend their dollars, right? They can't spend their money. But I think from the property perspective, it's, hey, let's create a more holistic full day experience. And I don't know if a brand handing out, you know, tchotchkes is going to be the best way to accomplish that, or you know, trying to get as many app downloads as possible for the particular brand. And so I think that's where, you know, when the message doesn't align, or at least the initiatives or the goals, where, you know, the teams, they want to create a great full day experience, leverage the team or the brand awareness, but, you know, to kind of get out of that analog thinking. So I've experienced that quite a few times over the last year or so.
I'd say jumping in on that, I think having a more holistic, like end-to-end strategy with the data. Like, sure, you collect an enter to win or a contest, or maybe even like something more creative, like a personality quiz, like what player are you, or maybe Ford is the partner, and what car are you, right? It can end there, but like, what do you do with that data? Rather than trying to figure it out after the fact, plan before, right? So you can, and this gives a team and a brand more opportunity to collaborate on content that is really compelling. So could it be, hey, we know we're going to promote 4 of these different car types based on you know, a series of questions that you sort of answer, and you get, you know, Amir is a Mach-E and James is a Ford F-150 Lightning, or whatever it might be. Whatever result that you get, could you then tie that into a carpool karaoke content series that you do with players or personalities or alumni or whatever it might be, test driving that specific vehicle? Now you can have a really deeply integrated end-to-end content strategy that ties that thing, the brand into it really nicely. But it wasn't just like, hey, well, cool, we're just gonna do a contest and I want it done.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lenny. It's you know, understanding what data points do you need, and then how do you gamify it to make it easy for fans to, you know, trade that information for the experience that you're providing. I think brands also, and this goes back to trusting the teams and like how teams think that they can best interact and weave them into their audience. At the end, you know, I'm a big metaphor guy, and it's like these teams and their social channels, they are DJs, right? And they're playing these tracks. Some of the content that they're putting out there is for the crowd, right? Some of their content that they're putting out is maybe someone specific, a niche pocket within that's looking for a certain like sort of thing, that song to move to. It is very hard. Like if you're playing songs and tracks that don't align to what the audience wants, you know, you're going to lose the entire crowd in how you're doing it. But there's Ultra Drip with the Warriors with Michelob Light, with Michelob Ultra, I'm sorry. And then there's Winning Smiles with Invisalign. And if you want to be remembered as with brand recall, they've got to be activations and content series that align back to purpose and why that brand is there. And that's going to be different for B2B. It's going to be different for B2C. Oracle, for example, you know, they work with the Warriors, they work with F1, they work with SailGP. They don't really care about their logo slap and the value of their logo. That information is helpful. And a lot of these brands, like really their biggest stress point is internally defending the budget that they're deploying on these activations. So you can't lose sight of, you need to make your brand look good internally just as much as externally of people looking. And I'm sure Uber is getting under a lot of pressure. They've had layoffs. Why did they do an ad with P. Diddy for the Super Bowl, right? Like, you've got to give them intel of like those success metrics that are happening, whether it's data points on these users to personalize, like Lenny is saying, whether it's looking at these audiences and engaging a certain group of people, like James is saying. But I think it's understanding that you've got to know your role within the fan day experience and game day experience of the fan. And so like Oracle, for example, they want to be in front of machine learning, data specialists, IT decision makers. So they tell their story. It's a storytelling platform of like how they help with machine learning for, with F1, with race day simulations, how to improve the players' performance on the court with the cameras that they have in the court for practice when it comes to the Warriors. But then they also have these different ways that they interact with brands that just resonates with like their why and how they're interacting with the fan base. And I think sometimes they don't trust the teams, the brands don't trust the teams enough to kind of run with it. But again, that's where I would hammer down as like somewhere where I think that the biggest miss is it's just like working with influencers. If you give an influencer, the words to read off, it's going to sound like a mercenary, right? Like they got paid to read this script. You got to let them tell that story in their own way, just like and like when Mr. Beast does stuff with ZipRecruiter is doing things they've never done before to be a part of that Mr. Beast YouTube video. You've got to trust the team in those ways to sort of activate and leverage, and the teams have got to be stronger about like, we've done this. You can do the data, you've seen other reports, you can present like where you think it's going to be. Some of the best organizations I work with on the team side, they already know that it's going to be a 2 to 3 time ROI. They're architecting that when they put the pricing page out. So it's just being a little bit more holistic on the team side to give that safety for the brand, but it's got to be trust from the brand that comes through. And that's just the biggest gap that I'm seeing right now, just from the nerd referee side.
It's that authenticity, right? Like exactly what Amir's saying. It's got to be authentic to your audience. And how do you translate that?
Yeah, Amir, you had referenced something that just recalled a memory. It's digressing a little bit, but when you talk about swing and a misses, you had referenced Twitter and being a DJ. But I remember back in, 2017, when the Vegas Knights were during their inaugural season, their Twitter account was on fire, and they were able to drum up so much interest. And whoever was running this piece of content for them was brilliant. And so I happened to be in Vegas during the inception and sort of as, paint was drying in their corporate office. And I had met the CMO at the time. And I said, they were moving furniture in. I mean, it was a brand new facility. And I said, you have to introduce me to your Twitter, your social media team. And he said, sure, he's over there. And so I went across the hall, and it was some 22-year-old kid staring at a wall with his first pair of khakis. This was his first job. And I had to shake his hand because he was absolutely brilliant in the humor and how he was able to build a presence. But they muted him after, some time because it became a little too kitsch. And I always felt that I wonder if it was the sensitivity of maybe brand sponsorship or what the reputation that ownership wanted to. But when you talk about personalities and letting them sort of be themselves and aligning, I think teams can certainly leverage that across social media as well. But a total digression of an anecdote, but reminded me of that. But the Twitter account is still very good, but I don't know if it's the same guy running it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
fabulous.
TCU. The TCU and the Frogs, it's just like the TikTok video content that they're creating is out of this world, so different from what they're seeing. But there was a lot of trust internally on the team side to go execute that content, and it paid off. And there's going to be instances where the content doesn't quite deliver, or maybe the DJ played the wrong track, right? And you get the things, but it's all about understanding two audiences. Like, you think about a wedding and you're a DJ and you've got my background's Iranian, my wife's background is American white. Like, you're gonna have to play some songs that cater to both those audiences. And so when it becomes the partnership like that, that's a for life partnership, right? Like, knock on wood. But like, you want to hit both those audiences in ways like, and again, very typical Amir, I do this all the time, but that Venn diagram, right? Like, and that middle percentage is going to give you a guide on what you need to do, what you need to say, elements of the story that matter, whether it's sustainability, whether it's the Tigres and their amazing content that they did with Apple and, with Ted Lasso and how they integrated, or they integrate like movie stars like The Rock and showcasing their story, their narrative. trailer to their fans and their audience. There's all these different ways that we can tell these stories within that Venn diagram. And I think the brands just need to trust the teams a little bit more. And the teams, like you're seeing it, I know you guys are seeing this, but they're staffing more on the creative side. They're staffing more on long form content. And so I see content as a bigger play, but experiential has to be there as well. It's not, there's a demand on the content side for it to create, but like capturing content at live events and people going through those experiences, these are all elements that have to be checked on the box to win fans over, especially the different segments. And I think sometimes we get a little too tunnel vision, very terrible metaphor, but if you're looking through the scope of the gun and you're focusing only on one thing, you're missing everything outside of that, right? And you need to have that holistic approach, like Lenny was saying, like we need to know what data is coming through. We need to get the in-person capture the data there. We need to create a neck breaking effect of like, wow, what that event is, like Columbus Blue Jackets and the stuff that you guys have been doing with them recently with their announcement, James. I mean, it's like we have to build these massive experiences to bring fans through, but we have to also articulate at the end of the day, what data are we looking for? How are we tracking that, and if it's going to be a winner or not? And I think I cut you off before I got too excited with this, Lenny. But I think you were going to jump into like the making sure that the storytelling and the way that we're capturing this data from people is done up front, so that you can personalize this experience and then personalize the ads that you hit with them. But I'm not going to over talk and cover your slide, I know, but I'll shut up now.
No, that's great. I was actually going to make a joke about James being a DJ in college or something. So that's what he was digressing about.
Before we throw out some James jokes, you can put those in the chat. But I want to go with two things. There's a lot of brands activating for one team, lots of sponsors. The teams have their goals, the brands have their goals. So I'm going to look at this two ways. One, how can brands hold the teams accountable for these activations? And then I'll flip it around, how can teams show more value to their sponsors? So if we can start with kind of that first one of how brands can hold these teams accountable. Feel free, any one of you, to jump in.
Well, I think from our perspective, we've seen firsthand the challenge with the teams maybe not working with the right partners, as in the vendors, to execute a brand experience. And whether that is regionally based or budget based, we try to offer a premium service. I know that we all value the work that we do and we've all done tremendous things, but sometimes for whatever reason, relationships don't align, budgets, timing, what have you. But I've seen so many times over that a team may work with the wrong vendor to execute a brand activation, and it's just a shoddy, embarrassing experience. And so again, anecdotally, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but years ago, one of our core products was creating these digital bobblehead photos and videos of fans through our interactive kiosks, right? And so we were talking with a property and a brand and said, hey, here's our unit. This is our flagship product. This was pre-Snapchat. So the overall populace was really interested in engaging in this technology, and it had worked time over time. And the team said, well, the budget's a little high. And, I happened to be at the marketing event just by happenstance to when they activated. And when I tell you the way that they tried to execute that concept, it was embarrassing and it hurt me because, they were draping people in green screen cloaks and taking a photo and then bringing it over to Photoshop. And then they had an intern, crop out the head and put it on and it was just, there you go. That's when you try to save budget. And from a branded experience, it was, I don't know, a 6-minute throughput just to get a photo where we had the technology that did it in 30 seconds. And so I think it's very important that, you really look at the service providers you work with and knowing that they're going to execute, based at the level of expectation that you want.
I'd echo the sentiment as well. Like, how many times can you do a better quality digital experience rather than a form stack or something like that as well? That's just, in my opinion, it's a bit of a cop out, and fans expect a better experience when it comes to that. from the brand side, how they can hold the team more accountable is if you're a brand that happens, if you're a local brand and you're just sponsoring your local team, it is kind of what it is, right? But if you're a more national brand that is sponsoring across many, many different teams, you may be running into that issue where, like, you know, everyone's giving you data in different ways or executing it differently. And that just also becomes a nightmare to be able to manage as well too. Oh, there's a company called Tradable Bits that can help you with that. But besides that point, from a brand perspective, that finding a way to have like a more seamless approach to be able to activate across all your different team partners in the same sort of fashion is going to really help streamline making sure that data comes back into your ecosystem properly, that it's following all the brand guidelines and the proper opt-ins and all that stuff flowing directly for you. So I think that's where I think brands could probably leverage their relationship better with teams and saying, I want you to be activating in this sort of way. You see it with some of the bigger brands, like a Geico or different things like that, where even a Samsung, I've seen certain things where they force them to a team partner to sort of do it that way. They should be using our platform, but maybe they're using something else, but that's besides the point. I think that's a big opportunity for a brand to leverage their power as well to get a more seamless way of executing.
Yeah, echoing what Lenny was kind of saying there, and definitely call me out if I'm miscategorizing it. But you know, one is like these national teams, they already have a footprint and a holistic sort of outlook of how they score every activation. If they've got a Wasserman, Octagon, a CA, and Excel, you know, all these different agencies that they kind of work with, Revolution, what have you. They probably architected some sort of scoring system, before they go into this, and that should be communicated, if not, double communicated with their partners. I'm sure most of these teams have this, and for their account management good. We're seeing a lot of new brands entering the space that might not have the same amount of iOS 15, iOS 16, not as effective sports, biggest audience, live, reality TV, unraveling before yourself. It's appointment based. So like a lot of new brands are catching wind of this and spending their money. It might not have the same traditional national sort of focus that some of these agencies have. So if you don't have that, I would say have a holistic approach to what you're doing. And then secondly, what I'd say is the memo that's kind of going out there is that the kids can't grade their own quizzes anymore. And I've been very, adamant that these brands need to trust teams more. But brands also are pulling data themselves and sort of looking at this data, why can't they work with Tradable Bits and MVP Interactive and establish a cadence and then go deploy that with the different partnerships that they have already with the teams. And so that's a way that brands could, I think, be a little bit smart about this, is work with the vendors directly and then go work with the teams as well once that sort of cadence is architected. But the way I kind of say it is, you have to use platforms and you have to track the data yourselves as a brand, and you have to trust the teams and what they're going to do, but you also need to explain this internally. And so the smaller non-national brands will lean on the teams to give them that data and insights, and the teams have to know that, how they're going to be graded against. But the national and agency ones, they need to have their own tools and measuring it the same way. And, you have to have that sort of moment where you're kind of combining each other's data points to understand so that everyone is completely clear. I think that clarity is missing in a lot of times and where those misses are made. But I think brands need to invest a little bit more. A lot of it's focused on the reporting side, which is great. That helps me. But just being candid, I think they need to work with the vendors more directly, identify what their mission is they're trying to do and the partnerships that they have and work with them in that way. A lot of times we're seeing the teams bring in the vendors, and that's necessary too for that. But I think that there's little elements and changes that I'm seeing from what I'm hearing from the brands directly. But, I think there's room to grow on all sides of the ecosystem for sure.
And as a reminder, please, anyone, I have a few more questions, but put your questions in the chat. One question, a lot of times having activated many concourses of my own with lots of brands, I always kind of ask them, what's the goal of the activation? And sometimes, they want to just use a new technology or use something that's gone viral. But that's not always the right fit for the brand or the team. And I always, that's why I start with kind of reversing kind of what's your goal, and then let's create the content or use the right technology or the right platform to meet that goal. So for each of you, James on the immersive tech side, Lenny kind of on purpose-driven partnerships, and Amir on some of your social stuff, how can brands set themselves up for success when activating with teams, kind of based on each of your specific niches?
I feel like I was giving you guys the opportunity to chime in. I've been talking first, so I'm going to put Lenny on the spot.
Cool. Well, you know what? Like, we've got someone in the audience here, Eileen from 5T, that I'm going to say I've learned so much from her on purpose-driven partnerships and sustainability and everything there, and that's where we really. Hey, Eileen, how's it going? That's really where we're seeing a lot changing, right? I think the Angel City model, seeing where brands and teams need to align more on that front. Like, she's given me some really interesting data that I can sort of share, and I think you can totally chime in as well too. But like, value-based sponsorships are outperforming traditional partnerships in delivering on fan engagement, earned media, critical KPIs, and all of that. Like, she's got some interesting stats that she shared with me. 67% of brand marketing professionals believe sponsorship is a better platform for value-based marketing than advertising. We know millennials are much more driven around value-based sponsors and things like that. So aligning what opportunities you can do to help within the community that the team is in. I mean, even today, I heard on the SBJ Morning Buzzcast about Truist Bank and Wake Forest, and how they kind of flipped around their sponsorship and partnership, where they're pushing around women's athletics, and then providing some really smart things like financial literacy opportunities and like access for all the team captains to like their leadership programs and things like that. I think that's where brands can really elevate what they're sort of doing and how they can activate the community. And then from like a data perspective and activation side, what we've seen is you have a regular enter to win contest and you can win a prize, that's great. But when you go and do something that's more purpose driven, like makes you feel good. Pittsburgh Penguins were one of our partners at the Renovate a Rink initiative. And they would get like phenomenal numbers and like quadruple the amount of engagement you normally would see, because they want to activate within their community and do something good.
Let's hear it, Eileen. Let's hear it.
Hey, hi everyone. Sorry, as I noted to Lenny, we have a tradesman here at the moment, and so I had to pop out and answer questions. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing that. We're doing deeper research right now to look at how valuations and fan engagement numbers are being impacted, some of which we're looking to do with Zoomph, but also digging into deal values. But even just again with the Penguins, just last week we were talking about their shift to, if you've seen it, the Penguins Pledge, a new platform for them to work with 5 key partners. But you know, so basically the partnerships are becoming less transactional, less, you know, off the menu based, as you've all seen, and more around this platform. And that's a win-win. One, partners want to come in for a longer period because they have a very important story that they want to tell. They're trying to move a needle, and they know that needle doesn't move in one game or one season. It takes time. And it might be that they're looking to change consumer behavior. It might be that they're looking to change attitudes about the brand, but not for purchase, but for investors, for employees. They need to show that values-based function. But even beyond the heartstrings, it's about ESG reporting, and whether that's illegal or legal in your state. Many CEOs have said it's not going away. This is their new model for doing business, because it goes right down to labor retention. It goes down to to managing risk in the market, whether that's climate risk or social risk, human health risk, all these risks. So the companies that are doing these things better are healthier, more robust companies, or at least they're planning for disruption. So there's a lot of stories they're looking to tell, and they're also looking beyond your front of house assets. They're looking at these things like financial literacy that's happening in the background, mentorship, whether that's diversity or gender equity and things like that, mentorship that allows the local business community to come in and use your facility in the background. But, you know, because it's your facility or your brand, you know, make it exciting, make it fun, introduce, you know, the engagement pieces that mean, hey, we're not just doing this meeting in a Marriott conference room, we're doing it, you know, at a venue.
It's
Anyway.
new inventory that didn't exist before, and
New
like,
inventory, massive new amounts of inventory. Definitely higher fan engagement anecdotally, but we think that bear out. Longer deal terms, higher valuations.
It's stealing Amir's you know, metaphors or whatever. It's like you're ordering up a secret menu at a In-N-Out burger or whatever it might be.
Ooh, and more importantly, more budget.
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond the marketing budget. It goes to the HR budget. It goes to other factors.
Yeah, and Eileen, we were talking about this when we had coffee the other day, which is interesting. You're now seeing corporate partnership and the community CSR side like kind of combining in this to kind of bring that together at the table, right?
Yeah, what we're seeing on the team side, and I've got now a list as long as my arm of the teams and properties that are moving to this model of a platform where you can bring in multiple partners. But to your point, Lenny, we're seeing also partnership sales involving community relations, partnership or partnership development or biz dev or just flat out sales, and activation in the digital teams, all in the room ahead of looking out for the partners and you know, identifying them, but then also in the pitch development and in the deal close. So definitely a shift in how and away from silos. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eileen and Lenny. Amir, is there anything else you wanted to add on that kind of teams bringing more value to their brands or brands holding teams accountable?
Yeah, I think that was perfectly said, and I think it's finding new ways to cater to that ROO. So there's different objectives they're trying to reach, and just understanding that those experiences, whether it's KPMG with what they're doing with Monumental Sports and building a live conference room sort of experience within the stadium, you know, Climate Pledge Arena with all the sustainability efforts that they're doing and prioritizing, Angel City with going 10% going back to the local community. I think brands are, one other example I'll give is the Hidden Genius Project and like bringing in nonprofits as a part of the activation. They did something with McLaren where they put the Hidden Genius Project logo on the McLaren car instead of, now I'm blanking on the name, of course, but like of the partner that was there. And so like, it's just finding those different ways of activating, telling that good story that wins and hits the target customers that they're trying to hit. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got to be a little bit more fluid in catering to these partners, and in order for them to spend more and see success. But the objectives now are changing every day. I mean, there's more and more brands that are coming in. So love that if we can find a platform to tell this from that emotionally connects the brand to those movements. I mean, you know, I'll put ourselves out there, what we're doing with Women in Sports Tech, right? Like that's a platform that we've connected ourselves to at Zoomph. That's important for us, where we tell stories through that and how we're trying to change ourselves. We're eating the same dog food that these brands are trying to do. And it's really telling these good stories about the work that we're trying to do. And the result of there's a positive outcome. We would do this with it, whether there was storytelling or not. You know, the storytelling helps the cause, and that's why we're a little bit louder about it. But these brands are looking, and it has to be full funnel. And so a lot of the Zoomph stuff, like we're really great at getting the top of the funnel metrics. But once you pass through and you convert, whether you're going physically at this location or you're digitally interacting with, that full funnel capability of that conversion and having that data to later run ads against, you know, with the Tradable Bits team, Like, you know, you have those passion points in context. And I think where sports needs to get a little bit better is like understanding where these people came from and then providing contextual hits after the fact. People are not going to immediately come to the brand because of one experience. It's short wins, it's long-term wins that need to be done for the brand. But if they can have that ability to speak to that fan after the fact, knowing they came through that channel, but they have to have an amazing channel to come through. So I think, you know, it's really exciting to see where we are with technology and how we can bring fans in and just have that attribution, full stack, being able to tell that story. So I think that's the most important thing to sort of clarify there.
Yeah, it's the ultimate platform, right? You know, cause-driven stuff tied to sports where you have fans and within the community, there's nothing better than that to be able to activate. So going back to everything we talked about earlier, like authenticity and everything like that, how do you wrap all those things together? It's like there's a huge win if brands and teams get on the same page and be able to do it.
I love it. Well, any other questions from the audience? I'm going to kind of start to wrap this up. Throw a little curveball, Lenny, James, and Amir. What has been, in your eyes, this past year, kind of the most successful brand team activation that you've seen? Doesn't have to be one you've done. Could have been one that you were your own fan and saw. And kind of why did you think that was a success?
I think touching on what Amir and Aline had said about the investment in women in sports, I have noticed and have been involved with a shift in brands really going in that market. And I think Aflac is probably, along with Ally Financial, aligning themselves to really encourage, invest, and really grow women's sports and sort of level the playing ground. And so they had, Aflac in particular, had shifted all of their NCAA budget away from the Final Four into the women's Final Four. And so we were fortunate enough to produce an event, an activation for them, but seeing that on the roadmap with maybe 6 other brands that are following that course, I think is, to Lenny's point, a trend that's going to be, you know, more commonplace. And, you know, so I would say, I think that one less about what the activation was, but more so the presence and the initiative behind it.
Gotcha.
I think echo James' sentiment. It's not about the one activation, it's that women's sport team and what they've been able to do. Angel City showing, there's a reason why they won Team of the Year. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly the number. I think it was like $90 million in revenue or something like that they're pushing out in sponsorship and purpose-driven stuff. Yeah, it's incredible, right? Like, so that's the movement. Like, if you're a brand and you're not sponsoring women's sports, one, there's a ton of value there, and there's a whole broader demographic that you're able to reach.
Amir, any?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Ally is doing. They saw the vicious cycle of player salaries not getting the salaries that they need on the women's side. They're just seeing the visibility on linear TV not being the same way that it needs to be for men's sports. I mean, they ponied up and they got CBS, NWSL on CBS primetime on Saturday 8 p.m., which is nice, but it's still huge, massive. And it's the ones that are investing and they're looking at the lack of audience, means a lack of revenue from the league side. So how can they infuse that money to kind of change that? So there's other players out there like Nissan, Aflac, Johnny Walker with Jane Walker with what they're doing with Angel City. So like it's exciting to see these brands kind of come in and invest into it. I think that same sort of investment needs to be looked at the men's side as ways to activate differently and ways to create these experiences differently, to like talk to all different types of fans. And it's exciting to see these teams, like at the end of the day, and this is something I've said again, that's kind of common. Sports is the platform. It's not the product. The product is the branded experiences that we build off. And so the real brands that know what they're doing is they create these branded stories on top of what they're doing. The latest one was Fanatics and what they did with the NFLPA and NFL stories of the jerseys. If you haven't gone and seen it, go see it. But it's like the emotional cue and reaction that you get Like there's nothing quite like the reason why we love sports the way we do is many reasons, but one of them is that human approach of seeing someone struggle and then succeed and seeing ourselves within those athletes. And it's if you can tie to that emotional cue, whether it's fighting for our planet or fighting for equal rights or fighting for winning after you've seen loss or struggle through persistency and consistency, those stories really bring out the most in us and remind us why that brand is there and that impact that it's mattered. So I know I've listed, I kind of cheated. I listed like 50 different brands there, but and like Lenny said, sports is the platform. I mean, it's the place to be right now that is gaining the most amount of attention. News is down. Americans are tired, at least in America, but like Americans are tired of negative news and politics and things that are there. And just the viewership ratings everywhere, men's, women's, it's up in years that we've never seen it. So excited to see all these new brands come in. I know we came together to help these brands get some hack tips and pro tips on like how to come in and activate. And every team has its audience to tell. You can't lose with any team. It's just, you got to make sure that you're aligned with the right team that has the right audience that you're trying to be in front of. And if you do your homework, you can quickly see which are the right opportunities to go after.
No, love it. As you said, I'm excited too that fans are back, teams are full force. If any of you in the audience ever have a question, you know, how can I do this? How can I do this better? Where do I start? Lenny, James, and Amir and myself are on LinkedIn and open to that. If you also have an idea or topic that you want heard on our next webinar, please send it our way. They can put their emails in the chat or feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. But want to thank all three of you again for your time, thanking everyone for joining us, and hope to see you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.